As I sat in the warm theater watching my son's sixth grade class recount their favorite memories of school last week, I couldn't help but notice how many of them involved a field trip. Probably 95% of the kids' recollections revolved around special, memorable events that didn't happen every week. A trip to Austria, a visit to the river, an event at a local kitchen space where they learned to cook lunch and then eat it, following a project-based learning unit on restaurant design. I remember field trips from my own school experience too. I remember learning about wolves at the Minnesota Wolf Center in 5th grade. I remember hiking through snowy fields and seeing the stars on a 7th grade overnight. And I remember going down an elevator mine shaft on Minnesota's Iron Range to learn more about the history of mining as I got older. A field trip is a powerful thing, and it can come in so many forms. Today, I want to share some ideas for field trips you can take without a bus and without a budget, because I know both can be a bit hard to come by. But that doesn't mean you can't set up some truly broadening experiences for your students from right within your classroom walls. So today, let's talk about virtual field trips, because there are a lot more options out there than you might think. Whether they're already curated online, waiting for you to design a web quest around them, or even shared in person over Zoom by a museum curator. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hey there, I'm your host, Betsy Potash, and one-pagers, project-based learning, and choice reading are my jam. I believe in you, and my goal is to help you explore all the creative possibilities you dream of for your classroom. I'm an educator, a chocolate cake aficionado, a traveler who can't wait to get back to Barcelona, and the kind of mom who brings her own mini makerspace to her kid's classroom when she comes to volunteer. I know this for sure, creativity isn't always easy. As a creative teacher, you get parent calls you treasure, and plenty of sidelong comments you'd rather forget. But here's the bottom line. Creative education can ignite a spark in your students and change their lives forever. You and I know this. You're an innovator, and while it's sometimes hard, it's so worth it. So let's explore the world of creative education together. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast. So today I'm going to walk you through 6 ideas for virtual field trips, but my hope is that they will get you thinking about how very many possibilities there are out there beyond these 6, because I think just by seeing sort of the shape of these, you'll realize, they're the tip of the iceberg. But let's walk through these 6. So number 1 is the Holocaust Museum of Los Angeles. This museum offers free virtual tours for students. It was part of their founding mission that they would always provide free educational tours to students. And so if you're in LA, you can go and get a free tour for your students right there. But for most of us who are not in LA, this virtual tour option is really cool. They have a virtual tour where they provide an introduction to the events of the Holocaust, an introduction to the museum's history and how it got started, what it does, and then a tour of the collection. And after that, you have some possibilities. And I'm not exactly sure whether it depends on how much time you have or how much time and availability they have. But they say that there are options to have a talk with a Holocaust survivor or a Q&A portion with a Holocaust survivor, which would obviously be such an emotionally powerful thing for students to experience. If you were going to do this field trip, you could do a lot to prepare leading up to it, to prepare students for the kinds of questions they might ask, to be doing research so they can be informed as they listen. And then you'd have such an impactful class period while you're actually taking the tour. And folks, in the show notes today, I'm going to be linking out to the websites where you can set these things up or find the collections that I'm talking about. So head over to the show notes at nowsparkcreativity.com. You can see the link for the free virtual tours as well as the email address for who to contact. Okay, number 2, I want to talk about the National Museum of the American Indian. This Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. is also free to enter, but again, you may not live in D.C., and so a virtual field trip is a really cool option. They have had in the past virtual field trips for students, and right now they are redoing their offerings, which I think means some new and really cool ones are going to be coming out soon. But this is also a good time for us to talk about how much you can do to discover online museum collections just with a field trip that you design. So that could mean you give students some specific questions or prompts like a website and have them explore some of the online collections at this museum or on other museums. But it could also mean that you let them explore freely, and then you give them some ideas for ways that they can share what they found back to the class or back to you. So for example, maybe you're going to give them an hour to visit the National Museum of the American Indian online collections, and you want them to create a mini tour for another student of the parts that they think are the best. So maybe they're going to visit everything that they want to. They're going to have a lot of freedom, but they're going to create a 5-slide curated mini tour where they're going to screenshot the things that they found most interesting and then create their own sort of comment, their own introduction to that room or object or collection that they're going to share with somebody else. Or maybe you're working on podcasting and you want them to create like a little audio tour. They can look at whatever they want. They can dive into what they find most interesting. And then they need to create like a 3-minute audio tour explaining, what they think another student should visit and why and sort of what's there. I think considering the modes of your sort of it's not a web quest exactly. If you're not just giving them exact prompts, it's more of a web exploration. It's a field trip, and then they get to maybe choose a mode for sharing back what they found interesting, whether that's just text or it's screenshots and audio or it's screenshots and text or it's just a series of screenshots that turns into a collage of their experience with some audio with it or some text with it. I don't know. There's so many possibilities. But I think that really adds an additional element to the exploration if they know it's a field trip, and then they are going to create sort of a more guided experience for another person or for you. Okay, number 3. Do you know about the Google Arts and Culture site? I think I heard about this like 5 years ago from Jennifer Gonzalez when we were talking about her teacher's guide to tech. I remember her saying something about this really cool site on Google and you could look at museums. And I came across it again this week and was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if they've expanded it or I didn't dive in properly at the time, but they have online explorations of like every famous museum that I've ever heard of. It's amazing. You can take your students to visit the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. You can take them to the Met. You can take them to the Art Institute of Chicago, to the Orsay in Paris, to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, the Uffizi in Florence. Like, you name it, they've probably got an online tour of it. And so this is really cool if you're doing a book that ties into an artistic movement of the time or some really key sort of historical moments that you could tie to art or sculpture of the time period, or maybe even if you just have a day in between other types of units or right after testing or something and you want to do something cool, there are so many places to explore on the Arts and Culture site. And sort of just as a test, I thought, I wonder if they have the National Library in Vienna on here, because I visited that recently in Vienna and found it so amazing, but it's also very small and niche compared to some of these huge museums. So I went looking and I found it. And 2 minutes later, I was like virtually standing inside the National Library in Vienna, looking around at all the books and learning about the art. So, I mean, don't think that whatever bit of art you want your students to see is too specific. Go and look at the Google Arts and Culture site. See if it has the unusual museum you're thinking of or library collection that you dream that they might have, because they might. They have a lot. It's really an amazing collection. Okay, speaking of amazing collections, the Civil Rights Trail is a series of stops all around the United States that can help anyone who's traveling, who's road tripping, learn more about the history of civil rights. But the Civil Rights Trail organization has created an incredible online collection of these sites. And they have 10 different curated experiences that have different sort of specific themes, titles. For example, one of the curated collections is called Risking It All and Riding for Freedom. One of them is called Sitting Down to Take a Stand. So maybe you're studying Martin Luther King, or you're reading the graphic novel March, or you're reading Claudette Colvin, Twice Towards Justice. This collection is an amazing way to have a virtual field trip of the Civil Rights Trail and learn more about the history that pairs with the text that you're reading. And so you can look around at all the different sites and create your own curated experience for your students. You can use one of the 10 curated experiences that are already there, or you can do what I was saying with the National Museum of the American Indian, and you can invite students to explore the Civil Rights Trail, follow their own interests, and then bring back the content that they find through their own medium to the class. But this is just amazing. There are so many videos. There's this interactive map. And then there are all these sort of specific trails within the trail that students can take. So I think this is an outstanding online resource. Okay, next. Visit the Globe Theater. This one is very straightforward. Students can literally just sort of like step into the middle of the Globe Theater, see a beautiful 360-degree photographic experience of it all around them. And then there are all these little dots that they can kind of walk over to and explore. And they can hear audio from actors, they can see videos, they can see different photos. They obviously learn also through text, and they have this chance to just be in the Globe Theater in London from wherever your classroom is. It's pretty amazing. Okay, last but not least, I want to bring up the National Geographic field trip options. They have a big section of their website that I didn't know about until recently called the Experiential Learning section, the Experiential Learning side. And one of the features of it is to link out to these different YouTube playlists that they've created. And one of the playlists is virtual field trips. And so I haven't had a chance yet to go through and watch a whole lot of them, but I quickly discovered 4 that seemed quite interesting and applicable within ELA. They have one called Native America Stories that I scanned through some and looked like it had a lot of potential to be used in class. One called the Black History Month Virtual Field Trip. One called Revisiting History, and one called Women Pushing Boundaries. That was all about sort of women in environmentalism. And it was easy to see that these could be cool experiences in class. They take kids virtually all over the world because they're National Geographic explorers and writers and photographers go all over the world. So again, it's a chance for students to like learn crossover information about science and history and culture, and to have their horizons broaden. And I think that's very often what field trips are all about. It's helping them see like, hey, I can have this experience. I can see how this thing that I'm learning is playing out on a completely different continent, in another country, in an art museum that maybe I want to go to in person someday, but for now I can actually step inside it virtually from my classroom and start to know that it exists and to know that it's having an impact out there in the world. So folks, those are my 6 that I want to share for today, but really remember these 6 just represent the tip of the iceberg. Whatever you're reading, think about what museums or nonprofits, organizations out there might be doing related work, and go check out their online offerings or their online contacts. Send an email to the person who's doing this amazing thing, who might be really honored to talk to your students about it and take them out to see what's happening in the field over Zoom, right? So probably there's something out there, a collection you can turn into a virtual field trip, or a person you can talk to, or even something that's already been created and is on the web as a virtual field trip, because so many were created during COVID. There are really a lot of possibilities for taking your students on a virtual field trip, even if you don't have any budget. So I really encourage you to explore. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.